But look at the dolphins. Look at them out in the ocean. They're completely free. They don't have any technology, but they did. They were immersed in it also. Remember when they came down to the Dogons a long time ago, they came down in a spaceship. They were involved in UFOs and all the other stuff. They were part of the Lucifer Rebellion. But they made the decision at one point to break away. And about 200 years ago, they totally broke away, and they're still emerging out of it. Their planet's almost totally out of it. Sirius is almost totally gone, except for just the humanoid part, which is the part we saw up here. The humanoids are slowly turning into dolphins and dropping off, and they're almost out of, they've almost extracted themselves out of that whole pattern. And they're proof that it can be done. Yeah.
Well, you said that the Syrians are in Christ consciousness, and yet they're still...
They're on a very, very low level of it.
So the Lucifer Rebellion's has gotten into that.
The Lucifer Rebellion has got into a lot of areas. Anybody in existence that is involved in external technology is part of the Lucifer Rebellion.
That's a shorter list.
Huh?
It's a shorter list.
Oh no. She said who isn't is a shorter list. It's the other way around. Who isn't is a greater list. Most people are not involved in it. The vast majority does not involve themselves in this kind of stuff at all. There's only certain levels that do, and we happen to be some of those people. Though it's a spectrum, it's not a day and night, black and white thing. There are people like the Greys who are 100% totally, absolutely, irrevocably connected to the technology. You know, the Darth Vader type thing that can't leave it, and have biologically linked themselves in so deeply that they can't leave it without dying. And then there's this whole spectrum going all the way through to people like the Syrians who are lightly into it, and to people like us who are lightly into it. We still have emotional bodies. We still are able to love and to feel. But we are merged in this. We could extract ourselves from this, and we could get out of it and become free again. And we're not totally addicted to it. So it's everybody's on kind of different levels of addiction to all of this stuff. What?
I thought the Dolphins knew how to create.
They do.
I thought they traveled to.
They do, now. But a few hundred years ago, they did it by growing their ships and creating these UFOs, flying ships, that were external to them. They were involved in it also. It was the means that they were able to get through from Syria to here. It's this whole thing with their external the living field Merkabahs is really relatively new to them. Considering how old they are, this is brand new. They've only been in it about 200 years, which is brand new, and they're not fully extracted. There is a part of them which is the humanoid aspect, which on their planet they've got beings that look like that, and they also have beings that look like Akhenaten. They have humanoid-type beings here also, which live on the land part. And those are still involved with the technology, though they are trying to get out of it. They are really, really trying to get out of it.
But when we shift, they will shift for us. Shifting will occur for everyone. When we shift, they're going to...
Yeah, we're all linked together. If this shift happens that we think, it's definitely going to be...
We're all going to shift together.
Yes, we will. I believe so. Really see how we could not. So they are great examples for us because they've done it. They've got out of there. You can't imagine what level of existence they're on right now. And the joy that they've got going because they're free. They're completely free. They can just disappear out of the water anytime they want. And within just a 3-day period, end up back on Sirius and go back over there. It's just a little jaunt. Hang out over there and come right back again. They can They can move right through space. They can fly in space as well as in water. And they have no vehicle whatsoever. They just total understanding of the Merkaba. We could see their Merkaba fields in the computer screens when we were working with them.
Drunvalo, you spoke yesterday on the polluted oceans.
Yes.
And the dolphins being evolved beings.
Yes.
What effect are they having on the oceans? More on a light aspect, and how are the polluted oceans affecting them?
The oceans are affecting them pretty strongly, and they see us. They know that we are the problem, and so this is the reason why they are trying to communicate with us and to help change the situation. The whales, for example, which are really the real powerful beings in this world, prior to about 1950 or so, 56 or whenever it was, no human being or country or anyone had ever captured a killer whale alive. They couldn't do it. They couldn't get the nets that could hold them. And suddenly, in 1 year, 6 of these killer whales just come up to the ships and sit there, kind of wag their tails, and allow themselves to be taken into captivity. And this was when they began, the cetaceans began to try to make communication with us and try to heal us through their examples and through their, the dolphins come up and all they do is just say, it's love, it's all love, it's joy, have a good time, and they're giving the example by themselves. And their examples are definitely affecting us. We're beginning to understand. I had a friend, Dr. Paul Spong, just to show you the dolphins really, the whales really, and the dolphins are in very high level communication. Dr. Paul Spong was trained he was trained in a college to be a whale trainer, and he became the whale trainer at the Vancouver Zoo, and he started training this killer whale there. But then after about a year, he began to realize that the whale was training him. It became real obvious to him. He says, wait a minute, the whale's actually, having more influence on his life than he's having on that one. And the whale got him to tell him about all the whales that were being killed all over the world, and started to influence him to stop the whaling in the world. So what did he do? He started Greenpeace. He was the founder of Greenpeace. He got the 6 people together. It's one table, which I got to introduce with each one of these people, and got them to go out and start this movement. And he went out on the ships, and he'd been arrested like 100 times. He'd go out these ships and just start shutting down everything, and they'd arrest him trying to get him stopped. And they did. They eventually got stopped the whaling in I don't know how many countries. There's like lots and lots of countries that Greenpeace has stopped all of this on. And one day he came to me and he said, the whales told him, he says he believed that he was in direct communication with them telepathically, that he could just talk to them. He could tell them in his head to do any of the things that he wanted them to do in the water, and they would just do it. And he got to the place where he just knew that it was just like talking. And they told him that there was no such thing as an individual whale or an individual dolphin in the world, that they were really cells in a larger body of consciousness. And that communication occurred, that all there had to be, if there was a dolphin, there only needed to be another dolphin within a 1,000-mile radius. And that dolphin could communicate to the whole through that one. In other words, they did have a 1,000-mile limit in their communication. And this whale wanted to prove this to him. He says, I will prove to you that this is true. So he asked me if he could have my house. I had a house in 450 miles inland on this place called Kootenai Lake. And he says, can I borrow your house for the winter? So I gave it to him. And he went in, and he was going to set up a sensory deprivation tank to float in there to get still enough to be able to make the make the communication, but he never even put it together. And so I came back a few months later, 3 or 4 months later, and he had removed a few walls in my house. It was a funny feeling, I'll tell you. And put these windows there that weren't there before and things. It was really beautiful, but it was shocking. And he had still not made contact. He said, I need more time, I need more time. And I said, well, okay. So, but I was there, so we were all living together. Him and his wife was living there, and me and my wife were living there, and my kids. And about 2 weeks later, he used to have, though if anybody, who knows Dr. Paul Spahn? You know Paul Spahn? Yeah. He's got kind of short hair now, and he looks very kind of professional-like. But he used to have really long hair and a really long beard, and in those days. And he came into the room one morning after about 2 weeks, and he had shaved his beard off on one side of his head and cut the hair short on one side of his head. And I said to Paul, I know something's up. I'm sure of it. He says, yeah, I made contact last night. And he says, I'm sure that I did. I did it. And he says, they told me that I was going to be a large influence in the world in all of this, and that I had to look respectable. He says, so today is my transition day. So for that day, he walked around half and half, and the next day he shaved off the other side. And what they told him was, the way they were going to prove it was, he said that he was to go to this bay north of Vancouver, a very specific spot, and he was to go there with video equipment and everything so that he could prove what was about to happen. And he was to tell his people, he had a whole group of people that worked with him, he was to tell them what was to happen so that there would be like no backing out of this whole thing. And that on a certain day, at a certain time, which I think it was 12 noon at a certain day, all the whales, of which there were about 100 of them, of a certain species, would come into this bay, would swim up to the shoreline, lift out of the water, and look him in the eyes. And that's exactly what happened. He went up there with about 30 people, and they put their microphones in the water and everything, and they sat around and they waited for this time. And sure enough, all these whales came swimming up to the shore, lifted out, and looked him in the eye. And obviously, he was never the same after that. He started the Orca Lab, which was started in that very spot, and he's been totally been immersed into whale research ever since then, and on his own, not using through the governments or anything else like he did before. And he spends all his time, I taught him how to play the silver flute, and spends all his time out in canoes with him, playing flutes to them, and communicating with them, that he has now learned how to do. And so the whales they have an extraordinary level of awareness. We can't really talk about it because when later I'm going to try to tell you, when I talk about the electromagnetic spectrum and light and all these other kinds of things when we get into this, like right now, we're looking at just a little tiny sliver of the electromagnetic spectrum, which we call light, which we receive about 90% of our information from. And then you get a little bit of information from sound. And those two things, which is also another little tiny sliver of the electromagnetic spectrum, and those two things are where we get almost all of our input into the world. But the dolphins are 100%. They see the entire electromagnetic spectrum, which is a world you wouldn't believe if you could see it all. It's here. We're just about blind. Almost. We don't really see much. And so they're on a really another world, another dimensional level of experience that we're not there yet, but we will be. Dolphins are conscious breathers. They cannot, if they do not purposely decide to take a breath, they will die. They have no automatic breathing system in them at all. And so they don't sleep like we sleep. In fact, they don't sleep. They have a different mechanism, which I guess I'll describe real quickly right now. When we go to sleep at night, first of all, we are either usually on the left side or the right side. It's hardly anybody's got both sides going on at once. We're usually on one side or the other, and of that side, we are maybe 5 or 10% of that side is functioning. 100% of one side and about 90% of the other side is unconscious. It's not functioning. So we're almost an unconscious being. But we're even more than that from a dolphin perspective, because what they do is they come into a circle, like I talked about with the whales when they go to sleep. They all point their noses together, floating on the surface, and they begin to rotate. And I'm not sure which way they rotate, actually. They begin to rotate around, and you said they would rotate counterclockwise? Is that what you said?
Most of the time
counterclockwise? Okay. And they start rotating counterclockwise. And then at one point, one of them takes a breath and goes in the water. And then followed by the next one, followed by the next one, forming this helical pattern as they're going down into the water. In other words, copying where they would be on the top of the circle as they keep moving down into the water. But as they take this breath and go down in, the dolphins have both sides of their brain on 100%. So even though they've got a brain that's about 350 grams bigger than ours, it's really a lot bigger than ours because they got the whole thing on. We got a 1,500 gram brain, and that's functioning on about, 30 grams or something. It's not very much. And so they start coming down in here. They turn off one side of their brain and leave the other side on. That's called sleep. And so they come down here, and then when they either get to the bottom or when they get back to the top, I don't know from the research that I read, I can't remember anymore. But when they get down at the bottom, where they turn this off, I don't know. They then start coming back up. As the other ones are coming down, they're coming back up, forming a double helical pattern. Coming back up until they match back up in the circle, and when they get up the top, let's say it's up there, they switch sides of the brain and come down and take it so that the other side can rest. So it allows one side to rest with every other breath. It's a very slow delta, you would say. If you know how delta and theta work. Delta's sleeping state is really, we're just going back and forth, turning off one side of our brain, turning on the other, but it's at a rate about like that. That's what we're doing when we're asleep. And they're just doing it much slower. And so when a dolphin looks at a human being, we're all sleeping because we have one side of our brain turned off. We're not fully turned on beings. Okay, here we go, more school. We ended up with these, we were working with the Fibonacci sequence before. Well, there are two, just as there are two primary shapes, the cube and the sphere, there are two primary mathematical sequences that are primary to life, that move all throughout life. One of them we saw was the Fibonacci. You saw us all in the bone structures and the shape of things and stuff all over the place. But there's another one. There's another one that's just as important. It's just as important as mommy is to daddy. Because the Fibonacci one is female. It's the female cycle. But there's a male one that's also equally important, and it's called the binary sequence. The binary sequence, instead of adding the last number to the last number, it's doubling the last number. So if you had 3, it starts out 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64. Just like the mitosis of cell division that we were talking about. That's the binary sequence. But it's really all over the place. And so I want to look at it for a moment. This is it here. And so it goes like this. 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, 64, etc. Now at the end of in terms of mitosis or cell division, at the end of 10 divisions you have 512 cells. And that happens to be what the apple is. When we see the apple, that's how many cells are in the apple, from everything that I've learned about it anyway. Now there's 2 facts that we know. One of them is that there are approximately 10 to the 14th cells in the average human body. And I got one too many zeros on here, but it's hundreds, thousands, millions, billions, trillions. There's about 100 trillion cells in the average human body. And if you talk to one doctor, he'll tell you a little more, and if you talk to another one, they'll tell you a little less. But there's a lot of cells in the human body. And another little fact, and there's lots of these facts, but this is another one. Every second of your life, 2.5 million red blood cells die and have to be replaced. Every second. I mean, that's a lot of red blood cells, 2.5 million. It would take you about 3 months just to count to 2.5 million. Day and night. So, I mean, it's a lot. And yet the only way that both of those things can be satisfied, in other words, the way the body can be created and then maintained, is only through mitosis, which is cell division. And so at the end of 10 of these, you got 512 cells. And you just look at this and you think, well, boy, it better start going fast, because we've got a lot of work to do here. And it just doesn't seem possible at this point. But watch the thing about the binary sequence, and those of you who studied mathematics realize it has a almost magical quality, that it has an almost impossible quality about it. At 512 cells, when it goes to the 11th mitosis division, it's at 1,024. Well, by the end of 10 more, it's at over 500,000. They went from 512 to 500,000, and from 10 to 20. And when it goes for 10 more cell divisions, it goes up to 530 million at the end of 30. And according to Anna C. Pye and Helen Marcus Roberts in their books, Genetics and Its Complications, Genetics and Its Concepts and Implications, Freudian slips. It takes exactly and only 46 mitotic cell divisions to create an adult. 46 times. That's a really interesting number, because that's the number of chromosomes we have. And it's also 1/2 the number of stable elements that we have in the environment. And it's just amazing that it can be done in 46 times. It takes 9 months to do it, but in 46 times it creates the whole process. Actually, it must be more than 9 months. I don't know when they figure there's an adult. I haven't read the details on that whole thing yet. The next thing I want to show about this is not having to do with organic structure, but computers. Us humans chose the binary sequence to create our computer structures, and which is kind of wise in a way, because it's one of the living structures, one of the living sequences. And if we had not chosen that one, it would not have been possible, really. And I would like to just very quickly tell you how a computer works, even though most of you know how it works. There's probably somebody here who maybe don't know that. And it's real simple. It's just, you got some light switches in there, called computer chips. You can turn them off or you can turn them on. And say you have, you got a real simple computer. You only have 5 computer chips in it, a few little places in there. And those chips are given names of 1, 2, 4, 8, and 16. So you got 5 of them, and that's their names. That's their numerical value. Well, by turning off or on any sequence of those 5 chips, you can come up with every number between 1 and 16. In other words, if you turn on the first chip that's called 1, you get 1. If you turn on the second chip called 2, you get 2. If you turn on both of those chips, you get 3. Okay? If you turn on this one, you get 4. You get, that's the 1, 2, 3, and 4. 4 and 1 is 5. 4 and 2 is 6. 4, 2, and 1 is 7. And then you have 8. And 8 and 1 is 9. 8 and 1 is 9. 8 and 2 is 10. 8 and 2 and 1 is 11. 8 and 4 is 12. 8 and 4 and 1 is 13. 8 and 4 and 2 is 14. And 8 and 4 and 2 and 1 is 15. And then you have 16. So you can get every number in between there. If you add one more computer chip and you call it 32, then you can get every number between 1 and 32. If you add one more computer chip and you call it 64, you can get every number between 1 and 64. If you have a computer that has chips in it, you can get every number between 1 and 100 trillion, which is 46 on and off. I begin to see this binary sequence in life over and over and over again. It just keeps repeating it, not just in the mitosis, but it's all over the place in all kinds of ways. And at one point I realized that we had mommy and daddy sequences here. And so I suspected, since there is always a geometrical nature behind numbers, I'll just throw something out here, by the way. Most scientists believe that numbers, or mathematics, is the hidden language behind their science. I don't agree with that. I say that geometry is the hidden shape underneath all numbers. It generates the numbers that is behind the science. And so for me, when I see all these numbers, I realize there's got to be a shape underneath it that has generated the 2 sequences. And or maybe one shape that generated one and one shape that generated the other. But because they appeared to be mommy and daddy to me, I highly intuited that there must be some kind of geometrical form or shape or pattern that tied the 2 together. And I looked for years on it and thought about it for years and years and years and never could find it. And then one day I was going through one of my son's 6th grade mathematical books, and I was just looking at it and checking up on things and seeing how stuff works. And as I was going through there, I came across something. And I really am sorry, whoever wrote this book, I don't remember their name. I would like to give them credit, but I don't know. I don't even have the book anymore. But he did something in there that he actually didn't know what he did. He did something really incredible and was unconscious that he had done it. But the guy had taken a particular geometrical form and plotted a logarithmic spiral on it. And when he did, he simultaneously came up with both the two sequences, the Fibonacci and the binary sequence. And he didn't even know he had done that. He was talking about something totally different. But this is what happened. This was the geometrical form that he was working with. It's called a polar graph, which is a 2-dimensional representation of a 3-dimensional form, a sphere. It's how to plot from a sphere onto a 2-dimensional form. It makes perfect sense now that I think about what it is. It's one of the sacred shapes going from 3 to 2-dimensional levels. And the other thing is about this, I always thought this was, when I started thinking about this, I thought this was something that maybe the Navy came up with, or Army, or something that was relatively new. And I'm beginning to find out that the polar graph goes all the way back as far as Egypt. That they had maps of the Earth going all the way back using a system similar to this. And so This is old. It's ancient. So this is how we usually see a polar graph, which is there will be a circle in the middle, and whatever the radii of that circle is, they'll come out that will become your yardstick, and you call that 1. And then you just come out that far to the next circle, and you keep coming out that distance to create all your circles. And then there are 36 lines equally spaced, which create your 360 degrees. Of course, even everything in here is not arbitrary. 360 degrees isn't arbitrary. When you know the geometries, there's all reasons why it's all in there, the more you get into this. But anyway, this was the shape, and what this man did was he took this middle sphere in here as though it was a planet in space. You could see it like that. And from the surface of the planet, he plotted a logarithmic spiral. As it turns out, the logarithmic spiral is the creator or the key between both of those other two the Fibonacci and the binary sequence. And so he plotted one around here. He started at 0 degrees, and he plotted this spiral around until it came around one time back to 0 degrees, like this. He started here, and he plotted this spiral, logarithmic spiral around one time. Now, he was only concerned where the spiral crossed the degree marks. And the system that he used to calculate this was using the central circle as your measuring stick of 1, and say you wanted to know where this point was, he would come here and he'd go, that would be 1, 2, 3, 4.5 approximately radii. You see how that is? This one over here would be 2.8 radii approximately. But you could calculate this pretty accurately. Well, look at the mathematics. This is from 0 to 360 degrees. At 0 degrees, it is exactly 1, because it's starting right on the surface of the planet. And at 120 degrees, it keeps going up and up and up and up, but at 120 degrees, it exactly crosses it at 2. And then over here, at 240 degrees, it just perfectly goes over at 4. And then, at 360 degrees, it returns exactly at 8. That's 1, 2, 4, 8. Binary sequence. At the same moment, it goes 1, 2, and also at 190 degrees, it crosses exactly at 3. And 280 degrees, exactly at 5. 360 degrees, exactly at 8. 1, 2, 3, 5, 8. Fibonacci sequence. Both unfolding from this particular pattern. And I went, wow! And I have to admit a defect in my personality here right now. I tend to, when I see things like this, I will check one thing out, and then I just know that it's true for the rest of it, so I go on. And I've never finished this work. I've only looked at the binary sequence of 1, 2, 4, 8, and I've never checked out what it means in terms of the geometries behind the Fibonacci sequence. I'm not real interested, but it could be very important to somebody's work here. I don't know, if you want to do that, you go ahead and do it. So I'm going to look only at the binary sequence right now. But here's what that means geometrically. Those points of 0, 120, 240, and 0 form an equilateral triangle around the center. Geometrically, this is binary sequence. It's more than just an equilateral triangle, because you are now literally looking at a tetrahedron, because the lines are all there. There's a line coming to the center, and you are looking at a two-dimensional view of a tetrahedron. So realize that as we start to work here. Inscribed perfectly in a sphere. However, I'm going to change this a little bit. There's another image in here, and that image is an equilateral triangle with a line down the middle. See this line here? That's another image that's in there. Well, there was another man. His name was Keith Kirchlow, and who's done a lot of real incredible work. You can check out his work too. It's very mental, but it's very good. And Keith just happened, and I don't know how he ever figured it out. It was just pure luck. He happened to find out, stumble upon, I think would be the best word, that if you had an equilateral triangle with a line down the middle, that an incredible, unique phenomena took place. He did not realize it was really a tetrahedron. He found out that if you took the line that was in the middle and you measured, you had to use it, this is the flaw in his system, you had to measure with a measuring stick. As soon as you're ever using, anytime you have to use a ruler, then you're not at the core. Go deeper. Because you should never have to measure anything. You should be able to figure it all out with nothing but a compass and just a straight edge. And all your measuring should be automatically determined by the lines, which I'll show you what I mean in just a moment. But anyway, he had to measure from here to find the middle. Once he found the middle, you draw a line straight up at 90 degrees and then bring it down to this corner. Where it crosses, you make another one straight up and down to this corner. And you could keep doing that, obviously. And he discovers something, that this line, this middle line, the lengths of these lines that are broken up inside of there do something rather remarkable. This is his writing. It says, continuing in this way, meaning this little pattern that he made, each successive proportion will be the harmonic mean between the previous proportion and the total length. Same kind of thing that we were doing with A over B and, for the phi ratio. And all of these proportions will be musically significant. 1/2 being the octave, meaning the length of this to the length of this is equivalent proportionately to the octave. 2/3 being the fifth, 4/5 being the major third, 8/9 being the major tone, and 16/17 being the half tone. It's perfect musical proportions. So he tried it another way, and he came down here and tried another pattern. And the same thing came out. He came out with 1/7, 1/4, 2/5, 4/7, 8/11, and 16/19, and all those were musical proportions. But there are musical notes associated with those proportions. And he sort of went wow, and I went really wow because I was seeing the other side of the whole thing that was going on there. So look at this. Here's the original one. To find the middle, you don't have to measure. Just draw a line from there to the center. It will come up, come down, and precisely break this in half to the middle. So the middle point is the octave. And so then I can automatically create the rest of the pattern that he created, but without any measuring stick. And in fact, even the external sphere is aligned with what happens in the middle, what happens off of here. We have done a lot of research, and what we believe now is that you can draw a line from any one of these three corners to any space inside of here. Say that you pick that one right there. You draw a line up to that one and then down, and make you mess with your patterns. You'll come up with all the musical proportions there are, period and end. All the harmonics of music that exist. No matter what scales or types of scales you want to use, they will all be there. And we should be able to prove this soon, which will mean that the harmonics of music are these proportions that are located in the simplest shape in existence, a tetrahedron. Even remember we have the 8 notes and 5 notes creating the chromatic scale, which have 12 divisions in it, and the divisions along each one of these sides is 12. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. There's 12 spaces on each one of these sides. While I was studying this and understanding how sound was a function of a tetrahedron, someone sent me a postcard It was Janice Dolphin. She's a good person. She sent me a postcard, and which happened to be a polar graph with reflective surfaces on it. How light reflects off of a polar graph. And I mean, it was right while I was in the midst of this, so I was sitting there going, wow, wow, wow. Oh, thanks for the postcard. Wow, wow. I couldn't believe it. It was perfect timing. So this is a polar graph, and this is how light reflects off of a polar graph with logarithmic spirals. And you can see it happening. And I was just like overwhelmed. I mean, for me it was very powerful. And you can actually see that the white light is exactly 180, and right at 90 degrees you can see the blackening, the black light spirals that come out of it. And we have seen that somewhere else before. The white light coming out here, 180 degrees off, the other white light, and 90 degrees from that, the black light, and 180 degrees from that, the other black light. Exactly what we're seeing right here. You can just look at it. We have the same energy fields around us, of course. You're just looking at it on a major level. As above, so below. Everything is the same. Now there's another point I want to make right now before I go on, coming back to this one. You remember before when I said that when you're looking at these geometries, that the lines that are on here are not just lines on a page, but they're spirit moving through nothing, and that they're maps. Well, there's another statement I'd like to make about it, and that is that though I made it once before, but I want to kind of make it come home quicker or harder, and that is that for every line that's on a page, it has an experiential aspect to it. It's not just arbitrary. It's not just a move. Every time spirit moves, there is a corresponding relationship into the outer world that is associated with it. In every single case. There's no exceptions. There is something associated with it. It could mean a rock somewhere, or it could describe a star somewhere, or something else. In this case, we're talking about harmonics of music. And so, you could be looking at that, or you could be thinking about this, which is, or what this represents, are musical notes, and they are really interrelated. There's really no difference. This strikes you primarily into your left brain. This comes into your right brain. If you add right now and you go 1 plus 1 is 2 and 2 plus 2 is 4, you're functioning from your left brain. If you hum and you go, you just switched over to your right brain. As long as you don't put any words or anything into it. If you listen to music without words, it goes to your right brain. And so, what I'd like to do, just for a moment, just for 1 minute or so, is I'm just going to play some music. Hopefully it's tuned. I'm just going to play this flute. It's a little Sioux Indian flute, Lakota Indian flute. And I'll play a little bit of Indian music. And while I am, you might realize that the sounds you are hearing and the musical significance of the notes that you're hearing is exactly the same thing up there, only there it's in geometry rather than in what's coming into your right brain through experience. So let's just try this for a moment. feels different, that's all. But one's the same as the other one. It's a lot easier to take this one in, I imagine, but that's really the same thing. And if you get this, then you understand what sacred geometry is about. Same way with, all those sine wave signatures that are coming up on computers and everything. They have direct relationships into human life, which we're discovering. You're discovering how she's discovering how they relate to different minerals and everything in the body. It all has meaning. Well, there was a man named he's not over there. A man named Charles Sherburne, and he was a fireman, and he wanted to study Noah's Ark. And so he read in the Bible that Noah's Ark was so many cubits one way and so many cubits another way. He didn't know for sure what the cubit was. There's a lot of controversy over that. But he knew that he could use the same proportion. So when he did what the Bible said, it came up with a block that looks like that, which he figured probably wouldn't float in water too well. However, the Noah's Ark, which they think they have now discovered on Mount Ararat in Turkey, does look a lot like a block. And it's extraordinary. I had the good fortune of having the team that went through there, found it, went through there, measured everything and went through the whole photograph thing, came back and showed me all the blueprints. And it's all sacred geometry of this thing. It's incredible. Every room is in proportion to the other one. There's nothing in it that isn't. And it has some extraordinary things that they're not talking about. One of them is this thing's about the size of Queen Mary. And it's got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of rooms in it. And you would have a problem if you had a lot of animals in all kinds of these little rooms. Would be air. Would be a big problem, wouldn't it? How to get air into all these rooms, because the whole boat was sealed on top and bottom and everything, so it could sink under any kind of conditions almost. And what they did was so ingenious. I mean, it's just amazing. They made this hole in the bottom of the boat that was a big room, a big open room. It's like almost as big as this room here, that exposed itself right to the water, to underneath. And it went up into the ship, and from the top part of that, there were these little channels that went out to all the various rooms all over the place. And when the boat went up in the water, it sucked all the air out of all those rooms. And when it went down in the water, it pushed all the air back into those rooms. And they calculated that it would exchange all the air out of all the rooms every 72 hours, 72 times every day. That's what it was. Totally remove all the things. That was pretty good. That was really pretty good. Especially for those hairy barbarians. And so anyway, I don't know if that's the Noah's Ark or not. It is an ancient boat found way up high on a mountaintop. And so it's hard to say for sure. But what he discovered was something perhaps different. He may have been looking for Noah's Ark, but he found something that is interesting, and I just want to present it. He said, well, if it's Noah's Ark, maybe they meant arc, like the arc of a circle. And so he put the proportions that were said in the Bible into arcs. The proportions were a 6-to-1, 10-to-1 ratio. What I mean by that is, if you took this block and you measured the height of it and used that as your measuring stick and called it 1, then there would be 10 of them going this way. And if you took the width of it and measured it, it would be 6 of them. In other words, on this thing here, if you measured this, there would be 6 of those going down this way. And if you measured it this way, there would be 10 of them going this way. And so it creates very specific arcs by doing a 6-to-1, 10-to-1 ratio. And it makes a thing that looks like this, looks like a kayak, only kind of a streamlined kayak. And here's what the part I don't know exactly what to do. I wonder if this will do it on here. I'm going to try this and see. I could do it on here. This might work on this thing here if it doesn't go off. Maybe it will. I'll have to kind of see if I can do it. If you were, at one point he decided to rotate it like this. And if you were to rotate an object like this, it should do what you see right there. It should just rotate. And if it did anything else, then there has to be something going on. I mean, it's like if you were to throw a rock across the room here, it shouldn't just stop and turn and go sideways or something without any force. But this thing here, if you turn it clockwise, it will rotate. But if you try to turn it clockwise, and I don't know if this is going to work on here, it will stop and turn around. It won't rotate the other way. And there were about 2 or 3 teams of scientists in California who were studying this thing for a long time. And they finally discovered that there is, it creates an ever so slight angle coming down here. The energy is transferred from one circle to the next that causes us to do this whole thing. They pretty much figured it out. But there are other things that have been come forth from it that are even more deeply intriguing. First of all, they have discovered that the arcs that are created this way, there's 5 arcs here, I think. There's this arc, there's an arc that goes this way, and an arc that goes this way. There's an arc that goes this way, and believe it or not, there's an arc that goes that way. It's an optical illusion. It looks like it goes in. It actually goes like that. It's a very long arc going in like this. There's 5 arcs there, and these arcs is the arc of the surface of the moon, the arc of the surface of the earth, the arc of the surface of the sun, the arc the moon makes around the earth, and the arc the earth makes around the sun. All in this one object. Which is incredible that should take place. And then they discovered that in the way that it turns around, when it starts doing this rocking motion like this, if you were to plot with a computer, you would see this thing doing like this. It goes in this pattern like this, and when they've mapped in any one of these individual patterns, they found it to be absolutely identical to the motion that the Earth rocks on itself. In other words, if you put a camera into the southern hemisphere, tied it down real good, used one photographic film and took a photograph once a week for a year, you would get 52 little dots on this one thing, and that's what the shape that they would be in. So there's a name for this. The sun appears to move in the sky over a 1-year period like this. It appears that way because the precession of equinoxes and the rocking of the Earth. And the motion that it turns around on is identical to another cosmic phenomena. Exactly the same. And then, recently, they've done something that they really don't understand about this thing. He thought, well, if this is Noah's Ark, then let's test it in water. And this is the stuff that's coming out in the last couple of years. They made these 12, 14 feet long or so like this and put them in water. And they discovered something. First of all, whenever you have something really, really primary, like in all your mathematical sequences, you only need to know 3 numbers and you can know the whole sequence. Remember I said that? On the logarithmic spiral, you only need to know 2. You can calculate the whole spiral from 2. And it's the only one in existence that they know of that you can do that with, the golden mean spiral. And every boat that's in water has 3 vectors that can move this way, and it can rock like this. This only has 2. There's one of those vectors, I don't know which one it is, it will not do it. You can't make it do it. It just simply won't do it. And this is the reports that we got, and I had eyewitness people that went out there and watched all this stuff. And when they put the boat in water and it goes through water, it does something no one's ever seen before, and they can't explain it, they don't know. But normally, if there's a wave like this and a boat's coming, the wave will just crash over the boat. This won't do that. When this comes in, the wave's coming in, this goes right around the wave. It does this motion. So when it's going through water, it's going like this. It goes down it. But what's weird is the person who's in the boat doesn't see a thing. They feel that they're going ahead real smooth. They don't see anything at all. They feel themselves, and so the first time someone did that, the people on the outside were going, "Holy cow!" And the guy kind of calmly got back in. Well, that was nice. And he goes, "Well, you were all over the place." He goes, "No, I wasn't." And so they had to put a video before they even convinced. I mean, it was like see the thing going on. For the person in there, they can't believe it, I guess. So who knows what's going on? What laws are being happening? This is so unique. Well, with all this work and all this stuff, and everybody's trying to figure out what this thing is all about, I had a man come here. His name was Brad Smith. He makes sacred geometry toys, and which are. If you ever get any of his toys, man, he's got a toy. Brad Smith. He's got a cube that's about this big, and it opens up, and there's perfectly smoothly fit in here all these toys, and you pull one out, and the toy unfolds into all these sacred geometry forms. It changes color and comes back and forms other shapes. He's got a cube that turns into a perfect sphere and back into a cube again. There's all these different ones, and then the whole thing, it's all the information, all in toys, and then the whole thing will fit back into there. It's great. It's an adult toy. I mean, I spent all day on this thing. Couldn't leave. Wow, look at this one. So he'll have one of these things, and you open it up, and it'll turn into an icosahedron, and you turn it in another way, and it'll become some other polyhedron.
Does he sell those?
He sold the whole process to Mattel or someone like this, and they're who knows how long it'll take before it gets out. It's been several years now. It's been 3 or 4 years, and it's still not out. He's in Santa Fe, New Mexico. Anyway, Brad came to the workshop and got all excited about this because he knew about sacred geometry, but he didn't know about the flower of life and how the flower of life tied it all together. And so he was really excited about it. And he went and he saw this form. He's really into shape. And he saw this form and went back. He said, "Well, this is obviously a sacred shape. It must be in the flower of life." And he found it. He found the precise location inside this pattern where of course these look like these little boats in there, but that's not exactly where it is. But there's a very precise place. Here's the hidden pattern underneath here with these broken lines, and the flower, the 6:1, 10:1 ratio is right here, located in between the petals. Here's one here and in between here. There's a ratio that's located in between there, and it describes the art perfectly. And so, anyway, now what Edmund Scientific has just discovered is that now further everybody's studying these things further is that they now have found out that these things occur naturally in nature. That nature carves these things out with river rocks. That there are rocks that are formed in water that come out this shape, though they don't look, usually the ends are worn off more, but you put these rocks down, they'll spin one way and the other way they'll rock and come back around again, without man even touching a thing. Okay, so now we get back to that thing about there being one arm 180 degrees off from the other one. So there's really 2 spirals in here, not just one. So if you plot 2 spirals, like nature shows, one 180 degrees off, what you get is 2 equilateral triangles, which of course are really 2 tetrahedrons, which is a star tetrahedron inscribed perfectly in a sphere, which, as we will see later, is the mathematical message of Cydonia on Mars. And it's also the message that's been coming up for the last couple of years on the crop circles. Precisely, mathematically, has been a star tetrahedron inscribed in a sphere, which is the key to the Merkaba, to interdimensional time-space. And the harmonics there is a star that will fit perfectly inside of that one, and there is a sphere that will fit perfectly inside of the original hexagon. And if you were to take that one that fits inside of there and place it on each one of these points all the way around there, what you would have is the fruit of life. And so, remember, that's one of the sacred forms. We first showed one of the how by connecting all the centers together, we came up with the sacred shapes that were the basis of structure in the reality. But by not connecting the centers together like we did here, but rather by concentric circles that are formed off of the patterns, and by radial lines that come out from the center, forming the polar graph, we came up with all this information that we had just looked at. The relationship of sound and light and shape and things that were formed through this, the harmonics of music and sound, were all. So I could have done it the other way around. I could reverse all the slides and say, okay, we're starting with here, and now we're going to go over the other way. That isn't how I got it, so that's how I gave it to you. And so what you've just seen is another one of the informational systems, another way of superimposing male energy over the female energy, radial lines coming out. And of course, I've just scratched the surface just a little tiny bit. I mean, we did not go into depth of what it means, what the harmonics of sound means relative to one of these things. We haven't, or light or anything else. We haven't deeply gone into it. We've just shown the relationship. And there probably are, I believe, 10 other sequences that are associated with this. This is my belief. 10 and possibly 11 that are associated with it, and I haven't even looked into those areas either, because I'm just looking for I'm just skimming along the surface here is all we're doing.
What does it mean that boat that turns one way and not the other way? Does it relate to something about the Merkaba, or?
When you go into the forest, you'll see that if there's a vortex coming out of the earth that is rotating clockwise, it'll kill everything in it. You just walk through the forest and be observant and watch. And you'll see these spots anywhere. They could be anywhere from the size of maybe this big to usually not much bigger than this room, though there are some. There's one in California called the Mystery Spot. Anybody seen that one? That's a big one. That one's about 2 city blocks around. If you've never been there, I highly recommend you go there. Highly, 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 highly recommend you go there. It's incredible. It's near San Jose, California. Santa Cruz. It's right outside of Santa Cruz, California. Anyway, going through the forest, you'll see them rotating this way, and it'll kill everything. If you see them going the other way, you'll still see the distortion in things, but they'll be real alive. They'll be super alive. But if the field vortex goes clockwise, everything in it, all the plant life, everything else like that, will just be barren. It'll be dead. There won't be anything in there. There won't even be bugs in there. Nothing. Everything gets out of that place. The one in Santa Cruz is rotating counterclockwise, and it's slightly tilted at an angle. It's coming out of the earth, so it's like this. And you can really study these things. They're so clear and sharp, they're like a piece of glass. It's like a glass wall. And you go there, and they have a board. They say, okay, here's the vortex starts right there. And they're not kidding. They have this flat board that's on there, and they got a level on there, so you can see that the board is absolutely flat. And they'll gladly let you bring your own level and put on there to check that board is flat. It's a little platform. And the line right through the middle of it where the vortex ends, on one side you're in the vortex and the other side you're not. And you can get 2 people the same height, and you get on this and the other person gets on the other side, and you look at each other. And the one in the vortex I can't remember which way it is, but I'll just say, I think it's the one in the vortex. Which way is it? I think the one in the vortex, you look at the person, and they appear to be somewhere between 4 and 6 inches taller. I mean, you go like that. And then you switch around, you turn around, and all of a sudden, you're looking down at this guy. And it's incredible, and you can do it all you want. You check this level thing, you get back on in, and you're only just like a foot apart. And yet, you really do appear to be a lot smaller. You appear to be bigger and looking down at the other person. And when you go in there, you can see all these trees just twisted around, growing in these big spirals and everything in there. And they got rooms in there where they got, you roll a ball and it goes uphill. There's all this weird stuff inside these things because it's a distortion of the magnetic fields and everything that's going on. It's a pretty interesting place. Yeah.
What is it
in terms of spinning the energy fields clockwise and counterclockwise, what is the relationship to what you just said in the forest?
Well, if you spin the energy fields clockwise, if you spin them counterclockwise, now let's put it this way, it isn't which way you're spinning, it's you got two fields, you got one going this way and one going this way. What life has found is the one that's going that way has to be spinning faster than the one that's spinning this way. And it needs to be spinning Fibonacci ratio faster. So you can have them equal speed. That is one that you can do is equal speed, and that won't do anything. But if you have the one, usually what life does is if this one's going 21, then this one's going to be going 34. This one's going 3, and this one's going to have to go 5. And if you do that, then that's a ratio that life has found works, and life thrives in that situation. It just thrives in it. And if you do that, you get those kind of fields growing around where there's plants and things like that. They just go crazy. They love it. But if you reverse it going around the other, if you increase the speed of this one, see the difference is, just so you get this clear, say this one's going 21 this way, and this one's going 34 that way. The difference is 13. So even though you got two fields going like this, the difference is 13, and so you have this overall slow rotational field of the entire structure going counterclockwise. This is the reason why all the planets, which all have these Merkabas rotating around them, with the exception of one that they think have been hit by another planet, all the planets are rotating counterclockwise because the Merkaba is rotating over speed. If that planet that's rotating the other way on there, I'll bet you when they get to it, there's not going to find any life on that planet. It's going to be a super, super dead planet.
Does that mean that you shouldn't spin a single field clockwise?
If you did, and if you spun a single field clockwise for very long, you would start getting very sick, and you would die. I'll just quickly tell you what happened to the first time. I talked about this to somebody here, but I don't think I talked about this to the group, just to you, right? There's an advanced workshop on this, which I'm not allowed to give right now. Maybe I'll be able to. I gave it 3 times, and maybe I'll be able to give it in the future. It's how to join groups together in a Merkaba. And I had a group in Colorado, and about 20 people, and we were sitting there, and it was the very first time I'd ever done it, and so I was learning. And it's very complex patterns. You're not using just this one here. You're using a series of other geometrical patterns that are out around the body. And you're spinning some of them one way and some of them the other way and some one way. And the overall speeds is what creates the pattern. And they have to be phase locked and all this stuff you have to do with them to get this pattern going. And so you start by creating the original Merkaba that we learned here. So we all did that. We created that one, then we created one for the group, which was down there. And then I had to switch to a different geometrical shape, which was to go this way. And I did that, and I got it going this way. So I had the overall effect of the Merkaba of the group rotating clockwise. And they told me when I did this that you have to do that, but do it real quickly and get into the next one so that even though you go counterclockwise for a moment, you just stay there for a moment and immediately switch to the other one. Well, when I created the one going this way, for a moment, I forgot how to do it. I couldn't remember the exact speed of, and exactly, it's a little complicated. I couldn't remember exactly how to do it, so I was sitting there going, let's see. And in that little let's see, we were sitting in a clear blue sky with everything was absolutely calm outside, and the wind took up, and it started going a counterclockwise wind. And it started going faster, and in about 30 seconds, which took me to do that, it went from totally calm to the trees were bent over like this, ready to break off, and garbage cans were flying through the air and everything else like that. And everybody in the rooms, their eyes were about this big. With my eyes about that big. And I was like, let's see how I do this. And I finally go, okay, I got it, let's do it. And we told them what to do, and we all went, and we got this thing going this way, and instantly all the trees went, just like that. And I really learned an incredible lesson. And one of the scientists that I was with saw that, and he goes, wow. And so he went back to his lab and set up electronically, using holographic sound, the fields that we had created, and got to that stage where we had done it at, and just left it going to see what would happen. And on an absolute clear day in Colorado, with no clouds or anything, within a few minutes, a black funnel that you couldn't even see through formed about a mile above it and came right down to the thing. You can stand outside and see this huge thing coming right down to the thing. I mean, we obviously turned this baby off, but life cannot live. It is the destructive force. It's the force that destroys us. And so. She says, so a clock goes clockwise, so it's like dying. That's really good. I don't know. It's much more complex than that, though, because you see, when a physical object is rotating clockwise, the energy lines are going counterclockwise. And so when you start really thinking about all this stuff, it's like rubbing your hand and patting your belly. It's more complex. Yeah.
With the Sufi dervishes, I mean, I've watched them on stage. They all seem to be spinning the same speed, and I've heard them say how to do it and tried it. And you're trying to spin out of 3D, evidently, but they don't give you a whole lot of details. What actually is going on?
Well, you're talking about the Mevlana Foundation of Rashad Fields?
Yeah. Well, no, not necessarily Rashad. There is.
But you saw this in the United States?
Yes, I saw them performing in the United States, and I forget who we tried it with, but.
Well, I believe that they're moving counterclockwise because they're duplicating the motion of the planets. Isn't this what they're doing?
The only part I can remember is you have to keep one arm up, the other arm
what they
down.
do is they're watching their hand as they're
watching
moving,
your hand,
so they don't get
and
dizzy.
you do get the sense of going up.
It's a very, very powerful thing just to watch it, just to be in the experience of it. But even though I was friends with Rashad for a while and all that stuff, I've sat right in here and watched them do this. I've never done it, so I can't tell you what the experience is.
But are they?
I don't believe that they truly understand the Merkaba. I think that what they are doing is trying to replicate or duplicate planetary motion and cosmic motions, which are Merkaba in nature. But I don't think that they truly understand the hidden nature behind what they're doing. Though I may be wrong. I don't think so, because I know a lot of those people, and they're not taught any of that stuff, so I don't.
But they also don't talk about it. I mean, it's only taught by very high dervishes, evidently. So,
Well, maybe so, but I don't think so.
Some things I'm sure are less older that people don't have the roots.
No, I understand what you're saying, but I mean, it's just my opinion. I don't think that they know about that. I don't think anybody in the world knows about it, with the exception of one group, and that's the Tibetans. And they won't talk about it hardly at all. They're the only ones that have been able to truly demonstrate it.
I
The American Indians are almost aware of it. They have when you ask them about it, they can remember pieces of it. They did have the memory at one point, like the Mayans also. They call this little hole up here the air window. They have a name. They have an American Indian name for the breathing through the top of the head.
Sorry, weren't the Native Americans trying to do that in the ghost dance so they would disappear from the whites?
Could be. I don't know. I don't know what that's about.
Because, you know, they were supposed to be impervious to the bullets, and they were going to join all those who had already gone on, and they were supposed to pass into another dimension.
Well, this is, there's a lot to that, and I do know from direct experience that's real. But I don't know what they were doing because I wasn't there, or what they were attempting to do. But in that same group that we were working with, what I was just talking about, we had taken a tape. I told her about this too. We had taken a cassette tape, and programmed the speed ratios in holographic sound, which would take us to the threshold of this experience, and then take us right to the edge where we could begin to experience the interface. That's what this tape had done. We had programmed. We knew what was on the tape, and so that was to make sure that we didn't go any further or anything else like that. I mean, we put the tape in, and we all did this experience. That mistake thing I did was one of the practice runs, but at one point we had all got ready and we knew what we were doing. We put this tape in, and we were going to take us up to the threshold where we could look around a little bit and see what some of the stuff was. And only God had a different idea, and I still don't know what the whole thing was about. I mean, it started going up through the cycles, and it gets very, very high cycles, and it's going. The spinning ratios, it was going wah, 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 and it got up to this one where we were supposed to stop. The tape kept going. I kept going higher and higher and higher and higher. And I looked over at this other guy, and he looked at me, and we were all going, holy cow, what's going on? It's not even on the tape, you know. And finally we realized we were being taken somewhere. We didn't have any choice. It was just taking us somewhere. And so we all just held on, and I was just wondering where we were going, you know. And pretty soon we popped out into this kind of a white, foggy place. And there were all these Anasazi Indians there. Lots of them. And they came right up to our group, and they said, and the group all could talk about this later, right? They said, who are you? We said, who are you? And we were right near Mesa Verde when we were doing this, which is where the Anasazis were. And I didn't know who they were, and they said that they were the Anasazi, and they looked at us and they said that we were the first white man that had ever been in this place. And at first they were real protective and they were asking us a bunch of things. And there's something I can't tell you having to do with a crystal he was holding in his hand, but I knew what the crystal was. And when I looked at the crystal and I saw it and I knew what it was, I told him what the crystal was. And when I told him what the crystal was, he just this was the leader, completely relaxed and said, "Oh, okay. Well, in that case," and became really friendly. Gave us a name. Gave us a tribal name and told us if we ever want to come back, fine, come on. But the Anasazis are alive, and they've found another parallel world on the earth to exist in, and they're doing just fine. They're all pretty much alone by themselves. And so what you're saying in terms of what they were attempting to do was something that their brothers had already done, so they knew that this was possible. Yeah.
Okay. Are you familiar? Here. Are you familiar with the Pleiadians? They have a book that is called
Bringers. Talking about Billy Meyer's work?
They have a book that is called The Bringers of the Dawn, and they recommend.
Is this Billy Meyer's work? Does anybody know?
Barbara Melchizedek.
Okay. Well, let me just say one thing before you even begin. The Pleiades is a very big place is huge and enormous, and there are all kinds, in terms of, we're talking about in terms of polarity consciousness, right? Not in terms of unity consciousness above all of that. There are very, very beautiful positive people there, there are very negative people there, and there are neutral people there. And there are also people that are both ways. So when you, so some people, they say like, the Pleiades, that's like saying, are you familiar with the Earth? You know, I mean, it could be anywhere. So I don't know where this person is referring to.
Okay, because I have an experience. They recommend to do a spinning. And at the beginning, I did the counterclockwise spinning. And I was able to do 99 easily. And after that, I realized when I read the book that it was supposed to be the clockwise.
Right.
And now I start to do the clockwise, but when I was doing the clockwise, it was very difficult. And I wonder if it's related to this.
Well, I'll tell you, there is the Pleiades is an interesting place. There is, the Pleiades is the solar plexus of the galaxy, and it's where most of the universities and school and higher learning takes place. And you kind of need to pass through that place in order to get from one place to another, usually. It's not necessary, but usually. And most of the Pleiadians that are associated with the teaching aspects of things there are really beautiful, super fourth-dimensional, beautiful, beautiful people. But there are some there that, you see, when the Lucifer rebellion happened, there were, like most people just watched it, but there were some that chose the light and some chose the dark, and then there were these groups, a few, that would play either side depending on what they felt would be best for balance. And for example, the Billy Myers people, who are from the Pleiadians, and the information that they are releasing there, these guys are working with the dark side, though they will none of them would admit it. And it's a very, very subtle. Even Billy Myers himself is not aware of what's going on. He's not aware. He's coming from pure heart and pure intention, but they're using him. And what they're doing is they're giving huge amounts of information that is accurate with little tiny things in there, which I would call like a virus for a computer, which is designed to break apart unity on the planet. Because they also agree with the Greys in terms of it would be best to replace us and with another race. So I don't know what she's doing, but if anyone is teaching a Merkaba that rotates clockwise, I'm not saying that you shouldn't do it, because that's up to you and your heart. I can't tell you what you should do, but I know from direct experience that will, for most life on this place, it'll kill it. Well, we'll see how long the school stays around.
Pay your tuition up front.
What? Yeah.
I wanted to ask about the Indians, because you were talking about that experience. Now, from what you're saying is they're existing on probably an overtone higher than the third dimension, not quite the fourth, but they're existing in a world that is on one of the overtones?
Yeah. It's usually, what the Indians have found is a certain area that is generally held for things like tree spirits and things that we call like elves and real simple spirits. They've found how to live peacefully in those areas. They're the kind of about the fourth, fifth, and sixth overtone of the fourth dimension. That's where they are. They're in the fourth dimension. Yeah. They're underneath the angelic realms, underneath the Christ consciousness realms. And once you're in one of those worlds, it's just as vast as this one. And then come back. Okay, one more question.
As you probably know, the Native American people, in their ceremony, in their Sundance, everything is clockwise, except
they move
for...
clockwise, that's right, but that's a physical rotation. Let me ask you one thing. Who is the... Are they physically... You're physically moving. You're rotating like this. Okay, that's different. That's okay.
The centers are teaching to spin the wheel clockwise.
Well, if you're spinning the field clockwise, that will do you in. If you're physically rotating clockwise, or like the American Indians move around the sweat lodges, physically move. See, look at this. If you've got a hose of water, right, and you want to create a field that moves counterclockwise, which way do you have to rotate? You have to physically move clockwise to create a field that rotates counterclockwise. So I didn't understand what you were saying. So what she's teaching is okay. If you, in what we're talking here is the body, the physical aspect is staying still, and we're creating the field that rotates counterclockwise. So that's what I was trying to say. It's tricky to understand. Yeah, I thought you meant they were creating fields that went clockwise.
At every octave, isn't there a change of the spin?
You mean past the Great Wall?
No, like on the physical level is okay. When you change to the next...
Well, that may be true.
Like when you're coming from the heart,
my
it would be going differently.
My instructions are only for here, and how to get from here to the other one. When you go up to different levels, there may be reversals in spins and things. I don't have that information, so I can't help you on that. You know, all these questions you guys have, I mean, I'm here to teach one subject, but all of this information can be taken out into any subject whatsoever. No matter what it is that you were interested in, no matter what you want to do, you can take what you're learning here in sacred geometry and apply to it, and all knowledge available is open. All possibilities can be open to you in terms of everything that you could ever want to know about any subject whatsoever, both positive and negative sides of it. And so all you got to do is just start applying it into your lives and take it out. Once you start working with it, you see how easy it is. And this is what the Palladian schools do. They teach you all this stuff first, how it relates to everything, and then it goes out